The trouble began long before Luke Morrison realized his life was about to change forever. It started with a single step through the swinging doors of the Golden Horseshoe Saloon. The noise hit him first. Laughter, clinking glasses, the sour mix of whiskey and tobacco drifting through the air. But none of that mattered. Something in the room felt wrong, like the night itself was waiting for him to make a mistake he couldn't undo. Luke didn't notice. He was already too far gone. He staggered toward the bar, boots dragging, spurs jingling with each unsteady step. His blue eyes, normally sharp and confident, were clouded with whiskey. At 28, he was known as one of the best bronc busters in Wyoming Territory. A tall cowboy with sun-weathered skin, a battered Stetson, and a quiet reputation for bravery. But tonight, the loneliness weighing on his heart felt heavier than any saddle he'd ever carried. Jake Hartley's voice boomed from the poker table. "Luke Morrison, get your hide over here! We need new money on the table." Luke pushed off from the bar, pulling the last $20 of his monthly wages from his vest pocket. He didn't want to think about how long it had taken to earn that 20. It didn't matter now. Maybe luck would be kind. Maybe whiskey would numb the ache inside him. The table was filled with familiar faces. Snake Eye Sullivan with his cold gray stare. Tom Snake Eye was a gambler who smiled like a man sharpening a knife. Samuel Blackwood, the town banker, sat beside him, his silk handkerchief already damp with sweat. Jake Hartley stretched back in his chair, smirking as he shuffled his chips. Luke dropped into the empty seat. "Deal me in." At first, luck favored him. Cards flipped in his favor. Bills and coins stacked high in front of him. Laughter filled his chest, warm and careless. He didn't see Snake Eye exchanging glances with Blackwood. He didn't see the trap tightening. He only felt the rush. But whiskey always betrayed him. His luck shifted, and the money slipped through his fingers faster than sand in a windstorm. Within hours, everything he owned was gone. His wages, his saddle, his rifle. His horse was all he had left, and even that was now at risk. Snake Eye leaned forward, voice smooth as poison. "I'll stake you $100, Morrison. One more hand. Winner takes all." Luke's instincts screamed to walk away. But pride was a dangerous thing, especially mixed with whiskey. "What's the catch?" Luke asked, voice rough. "Nothing illegal," Snake Eye said. "Just one little condition. If you lose, you do whatever I tell you. One task." No questions asked. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Men nudged each other, already sensing the humiliation coming. Luke swallowed the knot in his throat. "Deal." Cards slapped the table. Luke's pulse hammered. He held two pairs, kings and sevens. Not perfect, but promising. He kept his pairs and drew one more card, a 7. Full house. He shoved the borrowed money to the center of the table. All in. Silence fell as Snake Eye revealed his hand. 4 queens. The crowd roared with cruel delight. Luke's heart dropped into the pit of his stomach. He'd lost everything. Everything. Snake Eye lit a cigar and exhaled slowly. "About that condition," he said. "You're going to marry her." Luke blinked hard. "Who?" "The widow Johnson," Blackwood said, stepping forward. "The colored woman living out by Copper Creek." Laughter erupted again. Men slapped their knees, some wiping tears from their eyes. "Can't be serious," Luke muttered. "Oh, I'm dead serious," Snake Eye said. "You gave your word, and I gave mine. You're marrying her by the end of the week." Blackwood leaned in, smirking. "And if she refuses? I hold the note on her land. She agrees or I foreclose. Either way, we get our entertainment." Luke felt the floor tilt under him. He'd seen Amara Johnson before, a proud, beautiful woman who carried herself with dignity no matter how hard the world tried to break her. Her husband had died in a mine collapse 6 months earlier. She was alone, struggling, surviving with what little she had. He felt sick. He stumbled outside into the cold pre-dawn air, gripping the hitching post for balance. His breath came in sharp, ragged bursts. He'd ruined everything. He was about to destroy an innocent woman's life because of one drunken night. 3 days later, he stood in a crowded church wearing his only clean shirt, sober and ashamed. The pews were packed with townspeople eager to witness his humiliation. The door opened. Amara Johnson stepped inside. Luke forgot to breathe. She was stunning in her simple blue dress, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes strong and steady. Every step she took carried quiet courage. But the pain, oh, the pain in her eyes nearly brought him to his knees. She reached the altar and did not look at him. "I'm sorry," Luke whispered. "I never meant—" "Save it," she said softly. "We both know what this is." The ceremony was quick. Reverend Mills rushed through the vows, flinching each time the crowd laughed. When they were pronounced man and wife, Luke offered Amara his arm. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. As they stepped outside into the bright Wyoming sun, Luke leaned in just enough for only her to hear. "They think they won," he said quietly. "But maybe the game isn't over." She looked at him then, really looked, and though her face showed no smile, something flickered in her eyes. Something like the first spark of a fire not yet born. Together they walked toward the wagon, waiting to take them to the small cabin that would now be their home. Two strangers, two souls forced together, two lives bound by a cruel bet, neither knowing that fate had given them more than humiliation. It had given them a beginning. The cold wind of the Wyoming evening swept across the open land as Luke pulled the wagon toward his small cabin. The sky was painted in streaks of purple and gold, but neither of them spoke. Amara sat straight-backed beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't look at him. She didn't look anywhere. She simply endured. Luke's guilt tightened around him like a rope. He had brought her into this. She was here because of his mistake, because of his pride, because he'd been fool enough to sit at a table where men dealt in cruelty. When they reached the cabin, Luke helped her down from the wagon. "It's not much," he said softly. Amara stepped inside and paused. The cabin's simplicity filled the air. One bed, one table, a cast-iron stove, and shelves lined with what little he owned. It wasn't a home. It was a place built for one man trying to outrun his loneliness. "I'll take the barn," Luke said quickly. "You can have the bed." "No." Her answer was immediate, steady. "They'll already be watching us, waiting for something to gossip about. If you sleep in the barn, they'll twist the story. They always do." Luke nodded slowly. She was right. She always had been forced to think ahead, to live with the weight of other people's judgments. He regretted that she needed such caution. "I'll sleep on the floor," he offered, "near the stove." "That is fine," she agreed. Night settled around the cabin. Luke spread blankets by the stove while Amara unpacked the few belongings she'd brought. Clothes carefully folded, a Bible with worn edges, a silver hairbrush, and a small photograph of her late husband. When she hung a quilt on the wall, Luke couldn't help but stare. The patterns were bold, colorful, and precise. They seemed alive. "You made that?" he asked. "Yes, my mother taught me. It's an old pattern from her mother." "It's beautiful," he said, and he meant it. For the first time since the church, her eyes softened. "Thank you." Later, as they lay in the dim cabin, her on the bed, him on the floor, Amara's voice slipped through the darkness. "Luke, yes, this marriage may be forced, but I won't be," she said carefully. "I don't expect anything." "I understand," he said quickly. "I'd never—" He stopped, unsure how to say the rest. "Whatever comes, we'll face it with dignity." She was silent for a moment before whispering, "Dignity, that's something I intend to keep." Luke didn't sleep much. He lay awake, staring at the rafters, listening to the wind outside and the small sounds as Amara shifted on the bed. This woman, who'd been thrown into his life by cruelty, carried herself with more strength than any cowboy he'd ever known. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He would protect her. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains. Luke woke to the smell of coffee and the soft crackle of the fire. He sat up, stunned. Amara was already cooking. "You don't have to," he began. "I won't be a burden," she said simply. They ate in silence, but something about the warm biscuits and strong coffee eased the tension. After breakfast, Luke saddled the horses. "We need supplies," he said. "Clothes, food, tools. You should get what you need. I have enough." "No," Luke insisted gently. "You don't." She met his eyes for the first time that morning. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing," he said. "Because we're in this together now." Amara looked away, but Luke saw the faintest flicker of something. Respect, maybe, or surprise. A few hours later, they rode into town. Whispers rose immediately. People turned, fingers pointed, faces twisted into cruel smiles. But Amara sat tall in the saddle, her chin lifted, her posture steady. She refused to shrink. "Let them look," she said. Luke felt a surge of admiration. "You're braver than all of them." Inside Henderson's general store, the room fell silent. Martha Henderson greeted them with a fake smile. "Well, Luke Morrison," she said sharply. "Here so soon after the wedding?" Luke ignored her and guided Amara toward the fabrics. "Pick what you need. Winter's coming." Amara hesitated, uncomfortable under the stares. But she reached for a bolt of blue wool until a kindly voice spoke from behind. "That calico won't last a month," Mrs. Eleanor Patterson said gently. "Take the wool, dear. It'll keep you warm." Amara blinked, surprised. "Thank you, ma'am." "You're welcome," Mrs. Patterson said warmly. "My daughter Sarah admires your quilt patterns, by the way. She'd love to learn." The words settled over Amara like a blanket. A small kindness in a cold world. They finished their shopping, though, not without trouble. The feed store owner hesitated until Luke glared at him. The butcher lied about the last cuts being sold. The banker, Blackwood, watched them with smug satisfaction when they passed by the bank. But the worst part came after they left town. As they rode home, Luke noticed Amara sway in the saddle. "When did you last eat properly?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. Then quietly, 3 days before the wedding. "I sold most of my stores for the dress." Luke stopped his horse and stared at her. "Amara!" "Pride," she said softly. "That's all I had left." Luke felt anger burn through him, not at her, but at the world that had pushed her to this. "You'll never go hungry again," he said firmly. "Not while I'm here." She looked at him a long moment. "I don't know what to make of you, Luke Morrison. Just make of me a man trying to do right," he said. The corner of her mouth lifted, barely, but enough. By the next week, they had settled into a rhythm. Amara worked harder than any ranch hand Luke had ever hired. She milked the cow, gathered eggs, tended the garden, and mended old clothes with skill. "You don't have to work this hard," Luke told her one morning. "Work is what keeps me standing," she replied. "Idle hands invite sorrow." Luke watched her with growing respect. She fit into the land in a way he didn't expect. Strong, steady, unyielding. But peace didn't last. One morning, before dawn, the sound of hooves thundered through the darkness. 5 riders circled the cabin, laughing and hollering. "Morrison!" one shouted. "We know you got good horse flesh in that barn. Come out and we might leave the cabin standing." Luke grabbed his rifle and positioned himself at the window. "Get off my land," he yelled. A cruel voice answered, "Big talk from a man with a colored wife. Maybe we'll take her too." Luke's vision flamed red. Before he could respond, a shotgun boomed beside him. Amara stood at the doorway, eyes fierce, smoke rising from the barrel. "The next shot goes through your chest," she said. "Try me." The riders cursed and regrouped. "They'll torch the barn," Luke whispered. "I need to flank them. Can you hold them off?" Amara nodded without hesitation. "I can." Luke slipped out the back as she fired another warning shot. He circled wide, taking down one of the guards and stopping 2 men from dousing his barn in kerosene. But then something unexpected happened. A dust storm rose on the horizon. The riders fled in panic. The storm swallowed the land, roaring like a wild beast. Luke ran back to the cabin, pulling Amara inside just as the storm slammed into them. They crouched together as the cabin shuddered, dust pouring through the cracks. In the chaos, Luke grabbed her, shielding her with his body. For the first time since their wedding, she didn't pull away. She leaned into him, clutching his shirt. When the storm finally passed, the land outside was changed. But they were alive. And something fragile, something new, had taken root between them. They weren't enemies. They weren't strangers. They were partners. And partners, Luke knew, were worth fighting for. The dust storm left the land looking bruised and broken. But Luke and Amara stood in the doorway of the cabin, breathing the sharp morning air with a shared sense of survival. The barn still stood. The animals were shaken but alive. And Amara, strong, steady, unbroken, stood at Luke's side as if she had always belonged there. They spent the day repairing damage. Amara hauled water and swept out the cabin, while Luke tightened loose boards and checked on the stock. They worked as one, without needing many words. Every once in a while, Luke caught himself watching her, her determination, her calm, her quiet fire. "Thank you," Luke said as they repaired the fence together. "For what?" she asked. "For standing with me. For fighting beside me." She paused, studying him. "I did it to survive," she said softly. "But I also did it because you fought for me first." Luke swallowed hard. Something warm settled deep inside him. Something that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with the woman in front of him. Over the next weeks, their partnership deepened. Amara rose before dawn to brew coffee and start the fire. Luke worked the horses while she tended the garden and mended what needed mending. She learned the rhythms of ranch life astonishingly fast. Ropes, saddles, feeding schedules. Luke found himself relying on her, not out of necessity, but out of trust. But trouble was growing beyond their little cabin. Rumors drifted in from town. Jeremiah Hawthorne, a wealthy cattle baron with his sights on every acre of good land in the valley, had taken an interest in Luke's property. And worse, he had taken an interest in Amara. Luke herded at the Patterson Ranch while collecting his wages. "Hawthorne's been asking questions," Tom Patterson warned. "He wants your land and he's angry you embarrassed his banker friend. Be cautious." Luke returned home with heavy steps. At dinner, he told Amara everything. She listened carefully, kneading the dough for biscuits with calm focus. "Hawthorne tried to buy Thomas's land too," she said. "When I refused, he made threats. He doesn't accept no." "That was before you had me," Luke said. Sater didn't say, "And now? What happens if he pushes harder?" Luke didn't answer. He didn't have to. His jaw tightened. His hand curled into a fist. Someone like Hawthorne didn't stop until he took what he wanted. A week later, their fears took shape. Luke rode into town for supplies, only to find every shop door closing in his face. Mrs. Henderson refused him service. The butcher claimed he was out of meat. Even the feed store owner, who had known Luke for years, shook his head with a guilty look. "Hawthorne called in every loan in town," he whispered. "Anyone who helps you risks losing their livelihood." "I'm sorry, Luke." Luke returned home with an empty wagon. His frustration burned hot, but the moment he saw Amara, the anger cooled into something else. Resolve. "We'll make do," she said firmly. "I can stretch our food. I can hunt small game. We will survive." Luke admired her strength more than anything. "You shouldn't have to do this alone." "I'm not alone," she reminded him, and she was right. But Hawthorne wasn't done. Their fences were cut. Cattle wandered onto their property. Hawthorne's men accused Luke of rustling. When Luke tried to speak up, one of them spit near his boots. "Territory ain't meant for the likes of her," the man sneered. "Hawthorne will clean out this valley soon enough." Luke's blood boiled. "You speak about my wife again," he warned, "and I'll make you choke on your words." The man backed away, but Luke knew they were being watched, studied, plotted against. The situation grew worse when winter crept over the mountains. Food was running low. Supplies were scarce. The horses needed feed, and the nearest town willing to trade fairly was 3 days away across dangerous mountain passes. Luke made a decision. "I'll go over the mountains," he told Amara. "I can reach Bridger and bring back what we need." Amara's eyes widened. "It's too dangerous. Snow is already falling." "It's the only way," he said. "I won't let you starve." She stepped closer, her voice softer. "We face things together, remember?"
"I know," Luke said, touching her hand.
"But this time, I have to do it alone." She didn't argue. She simply pressed something into his hand, a small piece of her quilt. "Bring it back," she whispered. He promised he would. Luke left at dawn. The mountains were unforgiving. Snow fell harder each day. Wolves circled his camp on the second night. When they attacked, Luke fought with everything he had. He survived, but his horse did not. With a bleeding heart, he did what had to be done and continued on foot through the storm's icy rage. He reached Bridger barely conscious. Meanwhile, at home, Amara faced her own battles. Hawthorne's men rode in, circling the cabin like vultures. "Mr. Hawthorne wants a word," Red McCann shouted. "Woman like you shouldn't be living out here alone." "I am not alone," Amara answered, shotgun steady in her hands. Red laughed. "You are now. And accidents happen out here. Fires happen. Disappearances happen." Amara lifted her chin. "I've recorded every threat. If anything happens to me, the federal marshal will know why." Red faltered. He hadn't expected her courage. "You got grit," he muttered, "but grit won't keep you alive forever." They rode away, leaving Amara shaken but unbroken. 4 days later, Luke returned, frostbitten, exhausted, barely standing, but alive, and pulling a mule loaded with supplies. Amara rushed to him. "Luke!" He could barely speak. "You safe?" he asked. She pulled him inside, tears filling her eyes. "Yes, we're safe." As he warmed by the fire, he told her everything. She told him about Red's threat. Luke took her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Whatever they're planning, we'll face it together." Amara looked at him for a long moment. "I was afraid you wouldn't come back." "I was afraid I wouldn't either," Luke admitted. "But every minute in that storm, I thought of you. Getting home to you was the only thing that kept me going." Something shifted then. Something deep, unspoken, but undeniable. "Luke," her voice trembled. "This marriage began as a punishment, but somewhere along the way, it became more." "More?" Luke asked quietly. "Yes," she whispered. "For me." Luke reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. "For me too," he said. Before either could say another word, a gunshot shattered the window. Wood splintered, glass flew. They dove for cover. Red McCann's voice rang out. "Come out, Morrison! You've had your warning." Luke positioned himself near the window. "It's Hawthorne," he whispered. "He's making his move." Amara loaded the shotgun with steady hands. "Then we stand together." "Together," Luke repeated. Torches moved outside. Men shouted. The tension crackled like lightning. Just as Red lit a torch to burn them out, the thunder of many horses filled the air. Sheriff Carter's voice boomed across the field. "Drop your weapons. This is a lawfully deputized posse." Hawthorne's men froze as Sheriff Carter, Tom Patterson, Eleanor Patterson, and half the valley rode in, armed and ready. "You touch this land again," Sheriff Carter warned, "and you'll answer to all of us." The fight ended not with bullets, but with courage, neighbors choosing to stand together. That night, as the cabin grew quiet again, Luke and Amara stood close, shaken but alive. Luke touched her cheek gently. "Amara," he whispered, "whatever happens next, I love you." Her breath caught. "And I love you." Their first real kiss was slow and certain, the kind of kiss that belonged not to a forced marriage, but to a chosen love. Outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and promise. Inside, Luke and Amara finally stepped into the future they had earned, a future built not on a cruel bet, but on the deepest, truest kind of love the frontier had ever seen.